We have some major updates on the Mitch Marner and John Tavares contract front, as a report has revealed some very interesting details about their future in Toronto and whether or not the Toronto Maple Leafs and Brad Treliving are going to extend specifically Mitch Marner, but we also have some very interesting insight on John Tavares as well. So to break down what that means for the Leafs going forward and what it means for the rest of this offseason as they are preparing for a very important next couple of months here. So stay tuned for all that in this episode, but before we do, we have a quick message from our sponsor today, Fume. Are you trying to kick a bad habit to the curb? If so, you need to check out Fume. Have you heard that the flavored air category is quickly becoming the leading alternative to vaping and smoking? It's a whole new movement towards better habits led by the sponsor of today's video, Fume. Fume has a lot of delicious flavors to choose from crisp mint to cinnamon hearts. They have a flavor just for you. And with flavored air, you can satisfy your oral fixation through a passive diffusion system that utilizes no electronics, no vapor, and no combustion. And Fume has served over 300,000 customers, and you can be their next success story.
For a limited time, use our code DIGEST to get your free topper. It's the perfect accessory for your Fume device. Slip it onto the mouthpiece for a softer, warmer feel. It's great for those who love to fidget, and it's reusable. Head to tryfume.com. That's tryfum.com and use code DIGEST or scan the QR code on the screen right now to get your free Fume topper when you order your Journey pack today.
And thank you to Fume for sponsoring this one. Make sure to check them out. Thank you once again to Fume for sponsoring this one. Check them out in the pinned comment and the description as well. But Darius, you have some very interesting stuff. A lot of things are going on in Leafs land, whether it's the charity game that happened last night, whether it's just some contract updates. This is pretty recent news, and it is from Chris Johnston, and some very interesting details. We haven't heard many updates on the Mitch Marner, especially contract front, because it seems like they're going to keep him at least for the time being until the season starts. But Chris Johnston was asked who's more likely to sign a contract extension with the Leafs between Mitch Marner and John Tavares, and we'll get you into the exact quote right now. So he said it's a tough one. I think I'll go with Tavares, but that's not to say that Marner won't sign one. I just don't know if the Leafs will be able to accommodate the kind of deal he's going to want. It just seems to me that Tavares is highly motivated to stay in Toronto, going back to last week's captaincy change. Obviously, his next contract will be much more reduced than what he's at today, and we'll dive into all the contracts and things like that, but I think the more interesting storyline here is, of course, the Mitch Marner part of this. And again, he says that Tavares is more likely to sign than Mitch Marner. We both assume that. We also assume that Tavares is going to. There's been some reports that he's going to sign in Toronto at a discounted rate at some point, maybe even and most likely before the season starts. But Darius, what are your thoughts on this? I'm more interested in the Mitch Marner side of this because that plays a much bigger role for the Toronto Maple Leafs, not only in this offseason, but going forward as well.
I think why Mitch Marner is more interesting in this scenario is because we have no idea what's going to happen. And I feel like we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel for Tavares and what's going to happen with that. And that his contract might actually get done before this season even begins, right? So we might have some clarity on that. And Chris Johnson said last week as well that he thinks John Tavares is going to sign a team-friendly deal. And what that looks like, we don't know exactly, but if I'm going to guess or give a Darius guarantee or anything like that, I feel like it's going to come in the $4 to $5 million range because he's still a great player. And I think that this is a player who can still put up 80 points in a season and be really effective for the Leafs. And with a reduced role, I feel like he'll just be that much better. The Leafs can use that salary that they're saving on him in his next contract and put it towards maybe a second line center and move him, maybe down or to the wing or something like that and figure it out next year. So it's going to be fun to watch Tavares this year with a little less pressure. And if he gets that contract signed, we have some clarity on him, everything's going to be fine and dandy. So I expect the contract to get done for John Tavares soon. I feel like there's going to be very little drama there. But speaking of drama, there's going to be a lot of distraction this year with Mitch Marner and what that contract looks like. I don't think it's going to get done anytime soon. I think it's going to be next summer. And, he's going to be in a contract here. So he's going to play really well. There is something to that. So obviously he's going to have a great year, probably finally break that 100-point plateau as well. And what the extension looks like, if it happens, I don't know because, if he's going to sign an extension, it's got to be for less because it's not going to work for the Leafs because they signed a guy like Nylander last year who, like we saw, had a great year last year and is adding things to his repertoire as well, like adding the PK and stuff like that. So obviously Marner wants a lot of money, but it might be with a different team.
Yeah, Tavares, you've seen reports of rumblings of 4x4. It might end up being a 4x5. And we know we rewind last year to last June. Brad Treliving said this can't be about the core four. This is about the Toronto Maple Leafs. And that even almost a long time later, that's still the case at this point, even though they've stuck with the core four. We know Mitch Marner said on his future he wants to stay. He loves being here, all these things. And we'll get into some of the other things that are happening. But surrounding Mitch Marner. It's going to be very interesting to see what they actually decide to do with him. Obviously, we know that his point total is great. We've talked about this a lot. But Darius, I will ask you this before we get into some other things here. Do you have a prediction for the contract of Mitch Marner? And again, we know that his agent said he's going to play it out and then test free agency, so it doesn't seem like that side, so Mitch Marner's side of the camp, is super motivated to get anything done with the Leafs side of the camp. So, unfortunately, it might end up being a stalemate either until he gets traded or until the end of the regular season next year, in which case could be disastrous, or who knows, maybe he plays himself into a bigger, smaller contract. But it seems like his contract is going to be big, and the Leafs aren't willing to pay the 12 to 14 million that he's currently commanding, and that's according to Chris Johnson and really everybody else around the camp.
Listen, these are my honest thoughts on Mitch Marner. Okay. He's a fantastic player. He hit 99 points. He hasn't actually hit 100 points, but you can say it. He's a 100-point player in the NHL. He plays in all situations. He plays in the PK, and he's effective on the PK. He's effective on the power play, right? Like I said, he plays in all situations. He's a great hockey player who can put up 100 points a year. He's very valuable in that way. So he should technically make a lot of money. But with the Toronto Maple Leafs, he has not been a playoff performer by any means, right? Like he just hasn't been. If you look at his stats, and I've seen the comments and I've seen stuff on Twitter, and there's a lot of people who like Mitch Marner, and I do not blame them for that because he's a great player and he's a fun player. But if you look at his point totals in the playoffs after games 3 and 4 of every series, he does go away, right? When it matters most, he is not there for the Toronto Maple Leafs, at least in terms of scoring. Yes, he still does the other things like the PK and, the stuff, the unsung hero stuff. He does do that like on the PK, like I mentioned, but he's not there in terms of point production in the playoffs. So there is that. In terms of next contract, I've heard $12 million thrown out there. I think for the Leafs, he can't, get a raise. Maybe he can sign, a long-term deal and it'll look good over the course of the years with the salary cap going up, but he can't really get a raise because it doesn't make sense for the team. Even with Tavares getting a lesser deal, lesser money, right, on the cap, you're going to have to find somebody to fill that second line center position, right? So you're going to have a lot of money coming out again. So he can't get a raise if he wants to stay with the Leafs. Now it's up to him, right? Ball's in his court. If he wants to remain a Maple Leaf in that way, you can take the same amount of money and stay a Maple Leaf. But if he wants more, because he might be worth more on the open market, that could be true as well, then he's going to have to leave. And he does great stuff. There was a charity game last night that I was at that he played at. He's great with the kids, right? Great in the community. I'm sure he wants to be a Maple Leaf. That's all fine and dandy. But like you brought up before, it's Brad Treliving saying it's about the Toronto Maple Leafs and they have to do what's best for the team.
Yeah, and I don't see. I mean, we both see the comments. Everyone's saying he's not everyone. A lot of people coming to the defense of Mitch Marner. I think that he's a great player, like you mentioned. I'm a bit lower on him than a lot of people. I don't know. I don't think he's worth the 12 million to the Toronto Maple Leafs. I don't think he's worth 13 or 14 million. And there's a good chance that he leaves, and then the Leafs use the cap space and upgrade in other places. But you mentioned some of the things that are going on. We obviously saw Toronto Maple Leafs Mitch Marner and Max Domi captain all-star lineups for Hockey Night in Brampton 2024 to raise money. You were there, Darius, so there's a lot of stuff going on with that. We obviously saw it was a very interesting event. Now, I wasn't there. You were there. Do you have any thoughts on that since you were at the event? And again, lends credit to the fact that Mitch Marner loves Toronto. He's always said he's loved Toronto. He wants to stay in Toronto. He does all these charity games and things like that. But at the same time, it's a business.
Yeah, and there was a lot of former Leafs there, so that was fun too. Like even Wendell Clark was a coach, so it was a fun event. They're great with the kids, obviously. I love, Max Domi re-signing. He is great in the community. He wants to be a Maple Leaf. He's so passionate about it, so loved seeing that as well. And again, Mitch Marner, you can just tell in little events like this, like he wants to be a Toronto Maple Leaf. But like I keep saying, I just don't know if it's going to work out for the team long term. I really don't, because they have money locked up in other players now who do perform in situations that matter, right? They do. And like you said, you don't think he's worth 12 million. Like I do, right? I think he is worth 12 million. I just don't think he's worth 12 million on the Toronto Maple Leafs. That's what it is. Because he's a great player. He can play in all situations. Not every player can do that. Even the best players in the world, right, that make the most money. So it's going to be interesting to watch all year. It's going to be a bit of a distraction because it's going to go the distance. He wants to put in a good performance this year. He wants to get to 100 points. Really, he probably smashed that, honestly. I think he's going to have a great year to really show his worth and for him to be able to go to the negotiations and say, I want this much, right? So it's going to be a bit of a distraction. I feel like the numbers are going to be ever changing this year, but it's going to be fun nonetheless because it's good for the Leafs at least this year because everyone's going to come out to play.
Yeah, it's the last year of this weird drama with Mitch Marner. But let us know in the comments what your thoughts are on this. Do you think he's worth 12 million to the Toronto Maple Leafs? I'm sure he's worth 12 million to some team. I don't know if the Leafs are the team that is going to give him that, because I feel like if they would have, or they were willing to give him that, they would have done it already and got a contract done. But it does seem like Mitch
That
Marner
is
has
fair.
all intents of playing, all intents and purposes, playing the entire year and then testing free agency. But let us know in the comments what your thoughts are. We'll see you soon.